Why are so many bodybuilders dropping dead these days? Well, that topic is going around and being talked about a lot. However, I think I have a pretty good idea of why, but it's not exactly what everyone thinks. It's a little more than that. There's no doubt that bodybuilders are dropping like flies. I mean, it's pretty obvious. But there are several things I think that add to this phenomenon and specific reasons why it's happening. It's not just one reason, not at all. I think it's many reasons. I'm going to go over some of them today. Number one reason is the current judging criteria, in my opinion. Size at all costs. I mean, there's nary a striation to be seen among some top 5ers, top 10ers at the Olympia. They're just huge, massive, bloated beings. And unfortunately, that is being rewarded by the judges. So those are the guys who are winning. So what that does is it creates a need to be that in open bodybuilding, not in the classic physique and the men's physique divisions at all. It doesn't exist there. I'm talking about open men's bodybuilding, which is the main class. Within that class, you see behemoths, and we know only one way to get there. So that's part of the problem. The judging standards have to change. They're not going to, we all know that. But what happens is something in mountain climbing called summit fever. So you have these guys who are on their way to achieving that, to getting their goal, to getting to the peak, to the summit of the mountain, so to speak. And what happens in mountain climbing, when you get to within a mile of the summit of the mountain, you get what's called summit fever. And what that does is it makes you set aside every safety rule, everything that could keep you healthy, everything that you know might kill you, you do, because all you see is that summit, that goal. And it happens within the last mile of a mountain climb. And it's a huge phenomenon. The top mile of any huge mountain is littered with corpses. And now so is bodybuilding for the same reason. They want that title. They want that pro show. They want to win that pro show. They want the prize money. They want the accolades or whatever. And what goes along with that is all the unhealthy things they need to do. And they completely put common sense aside and they just bombard themselves with whatever they need to do to get to that point. That's a huge problem, and that's causing a lot of the deaths because we know that your body can only withstand so much. Even just walking around at that size, at that weight, is a huge stress to the body, regardless of what you got to put in your body to get there. Not just the drugs, but the eating, everything associated with it. Another factor is the drugs, not in the way that you're thinking. Back in the 80s and 90s, people did drugs. They were real. They were pharmaceutical grade, and there were certain risks associated with that. Now you have drugs where the people making them are not getting quality powders. They're not sure that the Primo powder is Primo, or the Equipoise is Equipoise, or the Tren is Tren. They don't know. It could all be tested. It could all be junk. It could all be inert. They don't know. And they're making this stuff in their bathtubs. We all know this. Not that every pro doesn't have access to some pharmaceutical grade stuff. Sometimes they do. But a lot of people are still using this underground stuff. And with that, we have now two risks. The risk of taking anabolic steroids, which we know what they are, plus the risk of the gunk and this crap and the shit and the toxins that are in it too. So now you have them using more than they ever have. You have them using dirty shit, along with the side effects of just using gear in general. All compounded in a system that's walking around at 300 pounds. That's another reason I feel that they're dropping dead. There's a double whammy effect with the gear. Another reason it may feel like more bodybuilders are dropping dead now is from social media. Bodybuilders dropped dead all the time back in the 80s. Trust me, I was bodybuilding back then. They died all the time for various reasons. It wasn't as much gear related back then, but they would drop dead, but you wouldn't know about it unless the magazines wrote about it, or you saw it on TV, which you just wouldn't. Now, you know in real time every time someone drops dead. So it seems like a lot more are. I'm not saying more aren't, but bodybuilding is also a lot bigger now too. Back in the 80s and 90s, bodybuilding was a cult sport. There were very few of us. So of course there were less deaths. Now it's so mainstream. Everyone's doing it. There are so many more bodybuilders. So of course there's going to be so many more deaths. It's just a mathematical certainty. Bodybuilders are pushing the envelope to an older age now. Back in the 80s, 90s, 70s, 35 was considered masters. They were old. Now 35 is just getting started. So you see guys pushing the envelope with their gear use into their 40s and 50s, and it's just catching up with them. So that's a huge part of it as well. longer careers, older guys doing it, and dirty gear, and more gear, and older people, and more people. It's a huge multifaceted thing. It's like any other extreme sport. And anything people do, anything human beings do, anything, any activity that they do, they can die doing. It's a fact that in the history of humankind, there have been 6 people who have died playing hide and seek. That's a fact. Underwater caves are littered with scuba divers who are dead and entombed in there doing what they just wanted to do. And guess what? The deepest dive was 1,020 feet at one point. Then they wanted to do a deepest dive 2,000 feet. Then it had to be 2,100 feet. Then it had to be 2,500 feet. And every time they tried to do it, that person died. Every time. And there'd be another person behind them willing to do it anyway. Same thing. So what's bodybuilding going to do? They're going to die trying to do what they have to do to be the greatest bodybuilder on that stage or in the world or in the nationals or whatever. And I never understood people who look at bodybuilders and say, oh, I don't get it. Isn't bodybuilding supposed to be about health and fitness? No. When was it ever supposed to be about health and fitness? It's an extreme sport, just like downhill skiing. That's not about health and fitness. Football is about health and fitness. It's a sport. It's about winning. So people always make the mistake that it's supposed to be about being fit and healthy. It's not. Recreational bodybuilder can be. Well, recreational bodybuilding can cause harm as well. But at the upper levels of the pro and amateur levels, the national level, it's almost a game of Russian roulette, really. What can I do that will almost kill me, but not quite kill me, and then I win? Another reason, and I know this is going to ruffle some feathers, but I don't give a shit because it's absolutely true. Greedy ass coaches, trainers. I'm mainly talking about the trainers who have to train the top guys, the top level guys. They have summit fever, sometimes as bad as the competitors do. They want to be the next guru/coach who brings in the next IFBB pro, who brings in the next Mr. Olympia, who brings in the next Arnold Classic champion, and they'll do whatever it takes to get that person there. The competitors are willing to do it. The coaches are more than willing to push the envelope. It's not their bodies. And they have everything to gain and not much to lose on their end. I mean, they're obviously hoping that the guy doesn't die, but literally they really walk that fine line between life and death. And they know they're pushing the envelope. And they do it anyway because of the accolades, the possible potential accolades and the money and the new clients that they might garner from this notoriety. And you guys know exactly who you are and who I'm talking about. A lot of them I know personally. These guys, man, they lose sight. They lose sight just like the competitors do. And if it seems like, man, this guy's throwing a lot of gear at me, you know what's too much. You know if you don't feel good. You know the difference between being tired because you're training and dieting and being just tired because, you have sludge for blood. There's a big difference. And any of these top level guys know what they're doing. And these coaches know what they're doing. What can be done about it? Not much on the competitive end of things. The standards aren't going to change. People want to see these monsters. And so they will continue to produce monsters. They're going to continue to reward that, and the stakes are going to get higher, and therefore the usage is going to get higher. The number of bodybuilders, everybody wants to compete now. Everybody comes in my office and is like, I want to do a show, They have like a month's worth of lifting under their belt. Everyone wants to do it. It's growing so fast that the number of people, you can go into any gym and half the membership there is using gear. It's ridiculous. Back in the 80s, 90s, if you did that, you were like a secret brotherhood that no one knew about. You were like a Superman among humans. And it was just not talked about. It was so closeted back then. Now, everyone's discussing their cycles. And they want to know what drugs you do before they ask you what foods you eat or how you train. And again, the numbers are growing. Whenever the numbers grow, you're going to see everything grow.
What are the 4 things a young bodybuilder should do to bodybuild safely?
Not do it.
As safely as possible, based on all the things we just talked about.
See, the problem with that is if you want to compete in open men's bodybuilding, you have to do what they're doing. There's no real way around it. As far as a solution, I just don't see one. The criteria is not going to change in the open men's bodybuilding. They're going to keep growing. And like I've heard many say, nothing's going to change until and unless a bodybuilder actually goes ahead and dies on stage, which God forbid, I don't want to see that happen. But I do think that day is coming. And all the reasons I just mentioned are the reasons it's going to happen. But I think it's inevitable. I think we're going to have to get to the point where we no longer want this as a sport. Right now, there's still too many people who want to be that big. There's still too many people who want to see people that big. There's still too many people who are judging that to be the best. It's not going to change. There's too much money involved now. There's so much money involved that people are willing to die over it. But I think it's a multifaceted problem. And that's why there's no way to squash it real quickly and easily and cleanly. It's never going to happen.